The committees provided training, mentorship, and credentialing, if necessary, to any person who wanted it. Proficiency in a particular skill or trade took priority over the need for profit, a characteristic which had made many of the educational monoliths of the past inefficient and unaffordable.
So as I said in one of the first sessions, traditional education looks a little different in the world of the novel than what we know today. When I say traditional education, I'm referring primarily to K through 12 education here in the U.S. Although the world of higher education would surely be touched by such changes, I don't really touch on that in the novel and in the story. It's mostly just lower level education. But traditional education is surely affected. It's definitely different. Just like some of the themes I mentioned are touched on throughout the book, it was always my plan to insert a reflective perspective of traditional education so that I could imagine a world in which it is done better than the way we do it today. Because frankly, the way we do it today is not very effective in my mind. And it leaves most people who are involved with it, including us teachers, parents, administrators, and of course the students, feeling largely dissatisfied after they've gone through it. I explore this primarily through the lens of Jinhua, the teenage main character, the teenage protagonist. And through her, the reader gets to know the world of education in Cereus Limnic. So at the beginning of the story, Jinhua, like a typical teenager, she's, as I mentioned back in that other session, she's 17, so she is going to school, but the school is different, and I've adopted some different terminology to talk about school. But I'll just give you a try and summarize as best I can the way the school system works in the novel. So basically, students take a generic spread of math, science, literacy, that's digital reading and writing literacy classes up to the middle school level. These are mostly taught by algorithmic tutors, which have been primed with data from the child's interests from birth. So they teach the child in a manner that's optimally suited to that child. So if they're a visual learner or if they're kinesthetic or whatever, then this algorithm kind of just recommends things. It's not directly the algorithm all the time, because it can be a robotic teacher, but it's just like recommending things that the parents can then go out and get. So there's still some teachers that are needed for students who learn best from adults, but for the most part, the classroom model that we know, the teacher standing at the front of class, students listening, yeah, that's not the primary means of education in the world of the novel. So after they complete a satisfactory number of fundamental knowledge courses, they're free to choose content areas that they're interested in, as long as they choose enough courses that are relevant to their level. So obviously you can't be like at a high school level and pick like basic arithmetic. It's not going to work that way. It's going to be something relevant to the type of work that you're going to do. So these courses in the book are known as committees. So committees are organized by people who hold credentials in a certain field or have extensive knowledge in a particular subject area. Notice I did not say degree, because the degree is kind of a limiting factor nowadays. So that's gone. But in a novel, even the most avid hobbyist can lead a committee and teach students who are interested in that field. So for example, say the Keith of the future wants to work as an AI technician. He learns from AI tutors until he completes his basic knowledge courses, which would put him at the equivalent of 6th grade level. He finishes by the time he turns 10. Notice even the basic level is not time or age dependent, allowing students who need more time to take their time and the students who excel to move on quickly, if they can move on quickly. Now, the key to the future, knowing that he wants to work as an AI tech from recommendations from people who already work in that field, is aware of what types of skills and knowledge he needs to do the job well. So he signs up for those courses and begins a sort of apprenticeship program. After completing the apprenticeship program, once again, this is not time dependent, but it's done when the committee leader or the master scholar deems that the candidate is ready. He enters a practical phase in which he learns all of the tasks he needs to know in order to perform the job safely and competently. After he completes this phase, he will be recommended by the committee for licensure in that field. And that's pretty much a summary of the education system in the novel. So I think I mentioned a few times that I work as a high school math teacher right now. And honestly, I had a hard time prepping for this session because there's so many things that I could talk about for hours about the education system, my experience, not just as a teacher, especially a teacher during COVID, but just as a student, my teaching program, my other jobs in the education field. I used to be a tutor, so I've been around education enough to see where its kind of shortcomings are, and there's a lot of them. But we are in extraordinary times with COVID. I'll give you that. And just like any other institution, the pandemic has exposed the weaknesses that were present in education long before Zoom was even a thing. Because there's a lot of teachers and educators that will blame, oh, it's because it's COVID. It's COVID. No, a lot of this stuff was there. It just, COVID magnified it, right? So when I think of education, I just have to look no further, like the problems with it, I just look no further than my own personal experience, right? So when I graduated from high school, I had some pretty decent academic skills, like better than decent. I had taken high-level AP courses in English, government, and history. I even took a physics calculus hybrid class, which is a pretty mean thing to do to a 16, 17-year-old kid. But I signed up for it, and me and my friends loved the class. We got a lot out of it. And I was a member of my school's first robotics club. And as I mentioned before, I was in the Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps, the JRTC, the Army version. So I had that going for me as well. But even with all that stuff, I still wouldn't say I was qualified to do any real work. I mention these things because most of us don't expect the average high school graduate to be able to do much upon graduation in general, right? We expect them to go to college to be able to get those skills or to gain additional skills through some other type of vocational training, whatever it is. But the point is, high school is not meant to teach practical work skills. That's kind of just common knowledge. There are some high schools that expose kids to practical work situations and, they have them do some type of apprenticeship program. But the main point of being in high school is not to do those jobs. Saying this as a teacher myself is pretty humbling and slightly depressing, I have to admit, but it's true. Even before I got into education and started teaching and subbing and tutoring, I've long thought our general education system was inefficient, and marginally effective at best. I mean, I used to think, even when I was younger, man, it takes you 18 years to get through the first part. Then, if you have the money or connections, another 4+ to be able to do any real work. in the future, this timeline will be absolutely way too long for the average person to be relevant in the workforce of tomorrow, especially when it comes to competing with the working algorithms and machines of the future. So what happens to all those people who can't keep up? Who can't find work because they don't have the skills or experience to be valuable to some company or brand? We're getting a glimpse into that world now during the pandemic, I think at least. Millions have already lost their jobs since it began, and all signs point to many of their positions in certain fields not coming back at all, at least not in the full-time form that they once knew. You know, there's a book that is really inspired, and I even put a few mentions of it in the novel because it really inspired my philosophy and way of thinking for this topic. But in his book, Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow, Yuval Noah Harari profoundly talks about the appearance in the future of this useless class of people. So what does he mean by useless? He means like useless economically, right? He describes it as a class of people who in the future, due to most jobs require redundant and repetitive tasks being performed by computer algorithms and machines, these people don't or can't work. They would just be unemployable due to lack of skills or just lack of need, because tasks that are automated are much cheaper for companies and overall easier to manage. I mean, we just know that. We see that now. Harari's book is about the future. But as we all know, that future, while it has not completely come to fruition, it's already taken shape today. If anything, the COVID pandemic has accelerated it. I think when people feel like they have no purpose in their life, they become vulnerable to all manner of suggestion in order to fill that void. That suggestion could be good or bad, depends on the person. But these days, tech companies, social media, and bingeable media can rapidly fill that void if people are not careful. And I've seen it happen, even in the people around me, during the pandemic. People are just bored and they're at home. They don't know what to do. So they watch Netflix all day, or they watch, YouTube videos all day or something like that. And, it can be fun and you can learn a lot from those things. But I just feel like all that knowledge, if it's not put to use, it quickly just goes away. And that's the most unfortunate part. In the novel, I explore this as well. As I explore what becomes of the unworking class of people in the future. And I explore through certain characters and scenarios how they spend their time and what they do with their lives. So based on everything I've discussed in this session, you got lack of education, you got no work, you got no meaning or purpose in life. You can probably guess that the picture of the future for this group of people, it doesn't look very good. And you'd be right. That's why I say the lessons in this novel are important, to help steer us away from this future that we are heading toward. It's not inevitable. We still can change it. It's just going to take a hell of a lot of work to fight against our tendency toward traditional and conventional thinking for what the future looks like to make meaningful change happen. Wasn't it Doc Emmett Brown in, I think it was Back to the Future Part 3, that so eloquently put it? The future isn't written. He says something to that effect, like, it's whatever you make it. He tells that to Marty at the very end when he steps off the train, And I believe that's true. I really hope that this book contributes to the betterment of humankind's future in general, for all of our sakes.
Music for the Cereus Limnic podcast was provided by Ryan Fonger. For more information about Cereus Limnic, visit keithhayden.net and subscribe, or follow @kh_author on Twitter. For future episodes, subscribe and follow the Cereus Limnic podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, as well as the Amazon Music app.